When the well-known novelist R, returning from a 3-day retreat in the mountains, arrived early in the morning in Vienna and glanced at the date on the newspaper he'd bought at the station, he suddenly remembered it was his birthday. 41, he calculated quickly. The realization neither pleased nor troubled him. He leafed absently through the rustling pages of the paper, hailed a taxi, and headed to his apartment. His servant informed him of 2 visitors who had come during his absence, of several telephone calls, and brought in the accumulated mail on a silver tray. The writer lazily sifted through the correspondence, opening a few envelopes when the sender's name caught his attention. One letter, written in an unfamiliar hand and unusually thick, he set aside. The servant served tea. Settling comfortably into his armchair, he skimmed the newspaper once more, glanced through the catalogues that had arrived, lit a cigar, and finally picked up the letter he had put aside. It contained nearly 30 pages, written in a hurried, uneven, distinctly feminine hand, more a manuscript than a letter. R instinctively felt the envelope again, searching for a note or signature. But it was empty, and neither the envelope nor the letter bore a name or return address. Strange, he thought, and took up the letter once more. To you, who never knew me, he read with surprise, unsure whether it was a salutation or a title. Who was it meant for? Him, or some fictional character? Suddenly, curiosity stirred within him, and he began to read. My child died yesterday. For 3 days and 3 nights I fought death for that fragile little life. For 40 hours, while his poor, fevered body writhed in delirium, I never left his bedside. I laid ice on his burning forehead, held his restless little hands in mine day and night. On the 3rd evening, my strength failed me. My eyes closed against my will. I slept for 3 or 4 hours, sitting upright in a hard chair, and in that time, death took him. Now he lies there, my sweet, poor boy, in his narrow little bed, just as I saw him when I awoke. Only his eyes, those clever, dark eyes, have been closed, his hands folded over his white shirt, and 4 candles burn tall at the corners of the bed. I'm afraid to look at him, afraid to move, because the candle flames flicker and shadows dance across his face, his clenched lips, and then it seems his features come alive, and I'm ready to believe he isn't dead, that he'll wake and say something childlike and tender in his clear little voice. But I know he is dead. I don't want to look at him, lest I feel the sweetness of hope and the bitterness of despair. I know, my child died yesterday. And now, in this world, I have only you. You, who play carelessly with life, unaware of my existence. Only you, who never knew me, and whom I have always loved. I lit a 5th candle and placed it on the table where I write to you. I cannot remain alone with my dead child and not cry out my grief, and who else can I speak to in this terrible hour, if not you? For even now, as always, you are everything to me. Perhaps I won't be able to speak clearly. Perhaps you won't understand me. My thoughts are tangled, my temples throb, my body aches. I think I have a fever. Perhaps I've caught the influenza that creeps from house to house. That would be good, then I could follow my child, and everything would resolve itself. Sometimes my vision darkens. I may not even finish this letter. But I will gather all my strength to speak to you, just once, this one time, my beloved, who never knew me. You alone I wish to speak to tell everything for the first time. You shall know my whole life, which always belonged to you, though you never knew it. But you will learn my secret only if I die, so that you need not answer me. Only if this fever, which now throws me from heat to chill, is truly the beginning of the end. If I survive, I will tear up this letter and return to silence, as I always have. But if you hold it in your hands, know that it is the dead who speaks to you, telling you of a life that was yours from its first to its last conscious hour. Do not fear my words, the dead ask for nothing, not love, not pity, not comfort. I ask only one thing of you, believe everything my grief tells you. Believe it all, that is all I ask. No one lies in the hour of their child's death. I will tell you my whole life, which truly began the day I first saw you. Before that, there was only something dim and vague, a place my memory never returns to, a dusty cellar filled with cobwebs, where lived people I long ago cast from my heart. When you appeared, I was 13, living in the same building where you now reside, the very building where you hold this letter, the last breath of my life. I lived on the same staircase, directly across from your apartment door. You surely don't remember us, a modest widow of a civil servant. She always wore mourning, and a thin adolescent girl. We kept to the shadows, locked in our humble, petty bourgeois existence. You may never have heard our name, for there was no nameplate on our door, and no one ever came to visit or ask for us. It was so long ago, 15, 16 years. No, of course you don't remember, my beloved. But I remember every detail with greedy clarity. I remember as if it were today, the hour I first heard of you, first saw you. How could I not remember, when the world opened to me then? Let me tell you everything, my beloved, from the very beginning. Grant me a quarter of an hour, and listen patiently to the one who has loved you with such quiet devotion all her life. Before you came to live in our building, behind that very door had dwelled unpleasant, spiteful, quarrelsome people. Though they themselves were poor, the poverty of others stirred only contempt in them. They hated us for keeping our distance. The man was a drunkard and often beat his wife. Many nights we were awakened by the sound of furniture crashing, dishes shattering. Once, she ran out onto the staircase, blooded, her hair disheveled. He chased after her, shouting, but neighbors from other apartments intervened, threatening to call the police. From the very beginning, my mother kept away from them and strictly forbade me from playing with their children. In return, they took every opportunity to torment me. On the street they hurled insults, and once they pelted me with snowballs so fiercely that blood ran down my face. The entire building loathed them, and when, I believe, the husband was sent to prison for theft and they had to move out, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. For a few days, a notice hung on the door announcing the apartment was for rent. Then it was taken down, word spread through the building manager that a certain writer had leased it, a respected, solitary gentleman. That was the first time I heard your name. A few days later, renovations began. Painters, carpenters, wallpaperists came in to restore the apartment after its previous tenants. The hammering, the noise, the smell of paint, all of it delighted my mother, for at last there was peace. You hadn't yet appeared, everything was managed by your valet, a short, dignified old man with silver hair, reserved and self-assured. He immediately commanded respect, for a valet was a rarity in our modest neighborhood. He addressed everyone politely but distantly, never growing familiar. He bowed to my mother with quiet reverence, and to me he was serious, almost treating me like an adult. He spoke your name with a certain tone of respect, almost reverence. For that, I grew fond of kind Johann, though I envied him, he was always near you. I describe all these seemingly trivial details so thoroughly because they explain how, from the very first days, you became the sovereign of a timid, modest child's emotions, mine. Even before you moved in, you already seemed like something special, almost magical. In our small world, your arrival was an event. And when one day, returning from school, I saw a furniture van parked outside the building, My heart fluttered. Most of the furniture had already been carried up, but the remaining items were so unusual. Figurines from India, statues, vivid paintings, countless beautiful books. I stood frozen at the doorway, watching Johann carefully receive each item, gently dusting off every volume. The books seemed enchanted. I devoured the titles on their spines. There were French, English, even languages I didn't recognize. I longed to touch them, but I didn't dare. All evening I thought of you. I had only a dozen cheap books with worn covers. I tried to imagine what kind of person read such elevated works, who knew so many languages. I pictured a wise old man with glasses and a white beard like our geography teacher, only kinder, more handsome. Even then, imagining you as an old man, I was certain you were beautiful. That night, you appeared in my dreams for the first time. And the next day, you finally moved in. I kept watch, but couldn't catch a glimpse of you. Then, on the third day, it happened. What a shock it was to discover you weren't old at all. You were just as you are now, eternally youthful, light, untouched by time. You wore a light brown sports suit, bounding up the stairs two at a time. Hat in hand, your face alive and radiant, your fair hair gleaming. I was stunned. Truly, I was frightened. You were young, slender, graceful. And even then, I sensed something strange, something everyone feels, the duality of your nature. You, light-hearted, playful, a seeker of adventure, yet also strict, demanding of yourself, a deep soul with astonishing erudition. I understood it at once, though vaguely, like a vision. You lived a double life. The outer one, bright, dazzling. The inner, yours alone. And this secret, this mystery, I, a frightened girl, felt in that very moment. Do you understand now, my beloved, what a miracle you became for me, what an alluring mystery? You, half a boy and yet a man revered because you wrote books, because you were famous in a world so far removed from my modest, childish existence. And suddenly you turned out to be cheerful, vibrantly alive, a 25-year-old dandy. Need I say that from that day on, nothing in our house, nothing in my narrow little world, occupied me as much as you did? I thought of you with the stubborn, tenacious obsession that only a 13-year-old girl can possess. I studied you, your habits, your routine, the people who visited you. And the more I learned, the more my curiosity grew, because your dual nature revealed itself in the diversity of your guests. Young men came to see you, and you laughed and joked with them. Poor students visited, and sometimes ladies in automobiles. One day, the director of the opera himself appeared, a famous conductor I had only ever seen from afar, baton in hand. There were girls too, very young, still students at the commercial school, shy and eager to slip quickly through your door. There were women. So many women. I didn't think much of it, not even when, one morning as I was leaving for school, I saw a lady in a thick veil departing from your apartment. After all, I was only 13, and I didn't yet know that the passionate curiosity with which I watched for you was already love. But I remember precisely the day and the hour when I gave myself to you with all my soul, forever. My friend and I had returned from a walk and were chatting by the entrance. A car pulled up, and you, with that same graceful, swift movement that still captivates me, jumped down from the running board. I instinctively rushed to open the door, and we nearly collided. You looked at me with a warm, gentle, enveloping gaze, and smiled kindly. Yes, kindly. And softly, in a friendly tone, you said, "Thank you very much, Fraulein." That was all, my beloved. But from the moment your gaze touched me, I became yours. Later I learned that you gave that gaze, that enveloping, inviting, undressing gaze, to every woman, to shopgirls, to maids, to passers-by. I learned that it expressed no feeling, that it simply emerged naturally, like breath. But then, at 13, I didn't know that. I felt as if I'd been scorched by fire. I believed that tenderness was meant only for me. And in that moment, the woman within me awoke. The woman who became yours forever. Who was that? My friend asked. I couldn't answer right away. I couldn't speak your name, it had become sacred, secret to me. Just one of the tenants, I mumbled. Why did you blush like that? She laughed with childish cruelty. And because she had touched my secret, the blood rushed even harder to my face. I flared up and shouted, "You idiot!" I was ready to strangle her. But she only laughed louder, and tears of helpless rage welled in my eyes. I turned and ran upstairs. From that moment on, I loved you. I know many women have said those words to you. But believe me, no one has ever loved you with such slavish devotion, such selfless surrender, as I, the being who remained yours forever. Because nothing compares to the secret love of a child, pure, boundless, obedient, fervent. A grown woman, even unconsciously, always hopes for something in return. But a child, never. Only lonely children know how to keep their passion to themselves. Others blurt it out to friends, dull it with confessions. They've read about love, heard about it, play with it like a toy, boast of it like boys with their first cigarette. But I was alone. There was no one to confide in. No one to guide me, to warn me. I was naive, inexperienced, and I plunged into my fate like into an abyss. Everything that stirred within me, everything that ripened, I directed toward you, toward the image that lived in my dreams. My father had long since died. My mother, a worried widow, was distant. My friends, frivolous, alien. They played with what was sacred to me. You became everything to me. Any comparison would be too narrow. Everything existed only insofar as it related to you. Everything gained meaning if it was connected to you. You changed my life. I, once an indifferent student, suddenly became the best in my class. I read hundreds of books because I knew you loved books. I threw myself into music with wild fervor because I thought you loved music. I mended and cleaned my dresses so I wouldn't appear slovenly to you. I suffered over the patch on my school apron, sewn from my mother's old dress. I feared you'd notice it and despise me. So when I ran up the stairs, I pressed my bag against my side to hide the flaw. I trembled with fear that you might see it. But how ridiculous my fear was, for you almost never looked at me. And yet, all day long, I did nothing but wait for you, watch for you. In our door there was a round peephole set in a brass frame, through which I could see yours. That tiny opening, don't laugh, my beloved, even now I'm not ashamed of the hours I spent there, was my window into your world. I would sit in the icy hallway, a book in my hands, afraid my mother might suspect, and I would wait for hours. I was like a taut string, trembling at every sound of your approach. I never left you, I watched you constantly, with tense attention, though to you it was as imperceptible as the ticking of a pocket watch, patiently counting your days in a rhythm you never hear. You glance at it only once in a million seconds, and so it was with me. I knew everything about you, your habits, your ties, your suits. I learned to recognize all your acquaintances, I divided them into those I liked and those I hated. From 13 to 16, I lived only for you. Ah, the foolish things I did. I kissed the handle of the door you touched. I picked up the stub of a cigar you had dropped outside, it was sacred to me, because your lips had touched it. In the evenings, I would run out into the street under 100 different pretexts, just to see which room in your apartment was lit, to feel your invisible presence. And when you left, my heart clenched every time I saw Johann descending the stairs with your yellow suitcase. My life came to a halt. I grew sullen, irritable, wandered the house, afraid my mother would notice from my tear-stained eyes how much I was hurting. I know all this was childish. Perhaps I ought to be ashamed. But I'm not. Never was my love for you purer than in those distant years of rapturous childhood. I could tell you for hours how I lived for you, though you barely knew my face, for whenever we met on the stairs, I would lower my head in fear of your gaze and rush past, as if fleeing a fire. I could lay out the calendar of those years before you, recount everything, but I don't want to weary you. Let me tell you only of one moment, the happiest event of my childhood. Don't laugh, I beg you, though it may seem trivial, to me it was boundless joy. It must have been a Sunday. You were away, and your servant was dragging freshly beaten rugs into the open apartment door. The old man was struggling, and I, suddenly emboldened, stepped forward and asked if I could help. He was surprised, but didn't refuse. And then, if only you knew with what trembling, I saw your apartment. Your writing desk, flowers in a blue crystal vase, bookshelves, paintings, books. I managed only a fleeting glance. Johann didn't let me linger. But that single glimpse was enough for me to absorb the atmosphere of your world. It became the nourishment for my endless dreams, in sleep and in waking. That moment was the happiest of my childhood. I wanted to tell you about it, so that you, who never knew me, might feel that beside you, a human soul was burning and fading away. And now about another moment, a terrible one, which soon followed. So immersed was I in you that I noticed nothing. Not even that an older gentleman, a merchant from Innsbruck, a distant relative of my mother's, had begun visiting us often. I was even glad he took my mother to the theatre, and I was left alone, free to think of you, to watch for you. That was my only happiness. Then one day, my mother called me into her room. Her voice was solemn. I turned pale, my heart raced, had she guessed. My first thought was of you, of my secret. But my mother herself was flustered. She kissed me, gently, twice, something she never did. She sat me beside her and began, hesitantly, to explain. Her relative had proposed to her, and she had decided to accept for my sake. My heart beat faster. I asked, "But we'll stay here, won't we?" "No, we're moving to Innsbruck. Ferdinand has a beautiful villa." I heard nothing more. Everything went dark. Later I learned I had fainted. My mother told her fiancé that I suddenly recoiled, raised my arms, and collapsed to the floor. I cannot describe what happened in the days that followed. I, a helpless child, fought against the will of adults. Even now, as I write, my hand trembles. I couldn't reveal my secret, and my resistance seemed like stubbornness, a childish whim. No one spoke to me anymore. Everything was decided behind my back. While I was at school, preparations for the move were underway. Each day, when I returned, I saw another item sold, another taken away. The apartment was being dismantled before my eyes. And with it, my life. One day, I came home to find the furniture already packed. In the empty rooms stood trunks and 2 folding cots, one for my mother, one for me. We were to spend one last night there, and in the morning leave for Innsbruck. That final day, with terrifying clarity, I understood, I could not live away from you. In you alone I saw my salvation. What I thought then, and whether I was capable of thinking at all in those hours of despair, I will never know. But suddenly, when my mother stepped out for a moment, I jumped up and, just as I was in my school dress, I went to you. No, I didn't walk, I was driven by a force unknown to me, irresistible as fate. I trembled all over, my legs barely moved, stiff as wood. I was ready, though I didn't even know what I wanted, to fall at your feet, to beg you to keep me, as a servant, a slave, anything. I fear you'll laugh at the obsession of a 15-year-old girl. But, my beloved, you wouldn't have laughed if you'd seen me standing there on the cold landing, frozen with fear, and yet, obeying that mysterious force, forcing my trembling hand, as if tearing it from my body, to rise and, after an agonizing struggle that lasted an eternity, press the doorbell. I still hear that sharp, piercing ring and the silence that followed. My blood froze, my heart stopped, it only listened. Were you coming? But you didn't come. No one came. You must have been out, and Johann had gone shopping. I wandered back, carrying in my ears the dead echo of the bell, into our dismantled, desolate apartment, and collapsed onto a bundle of packed things. Those few steps had exhausted me more than if I'd trudged through deep snow for hours. Yet despite everything, my resolve burned brighter, to see you, to speak to you before I was taken away. I swear, I had no other thought. I knew nothing else, because I thought of nothing else but you. I wanted only one thing, to see you, to feel your nearness. All night, that long, icy January night, I waited for you. As soon as my mother fell asleep, I slipped into the hallway and listened. Were you coming? I was exhausted, my body ached, there wasn't even a chair to sit on. I lay down on the bare, cold floor, where the draft seeped in under the door. In a thin dress, without a blanket, I was afraid to warm myself, afraid to fall asleep and miss the sound of your steps. I was in pain, curled up tightly, my hands trembling. I had to stand up now and then just to keep warm. But I kept waiting. Waiting for you, as for my fate. Finally, it must have been 2 or 3 in the morning, I heard the front door downstairs slam shut, and then footsteps on the stairs. In that moment, I no longer felt the cold, I was flooded with heat. I quietly opened the door, ready to run to you, to fall at your feet. Ah, I don't even know what I would have done then, foolish child that I was. The steps drew closer. A flicker of candlelight appeared. I trembled, clutching the doorknob. Was it you? Or someone else? Yes, it was you. But you weren't alone. I heard a soft laugh, the rustle of a silk dress, and your quiet voice. You were coming home with a woman. How I survived that night, I don't know. At 8 in the morning, I was taken to Innsbruck. I could no longer resist. My child died last night. Now I am alone again, if I am still meant to live. Tomorrow strangers in black will come, bring a coffin, and place my child inside, my poor, only child. Perhaps friends will come, bring wreaths. But what do flowers mean beside a coffin? They will try to comfort me, speak words, words, words. But what good are they? I know, I will remain alone. There is nothing more terrifying than loneliness among people. I learned that then, in those endless 2 years I spent in Innsbruck, from 16 to 18. I lived in that household like a prisoner, like someone cast out. My stepfather, a quiet, reserved man, treated me kindly. My mother, as if trying to make amends, granted my every wish. Young men sought my attention, I rejected them all with stubborn, almost fierce resolve. I did not want to be happy, not away from you. I deliberately shut myself into a dark world of self-torment and solitude. I refused to wear new dresses. Declined concerts, theaters, walks. I hardly left the house. Would you believe it, my beloved, I know barely a dozen streets in that town where I lived for 2 years. I grieved and wanted to grieve. I intoxicated myself with every drop of bitterness that could deepen my sorrow, the sorrow of not seeing you. I didn't want to be distracted from my passion. I wanted to live only through you. I sat at home alone, did nothing all day, only thought of you. I sifted through 1,000 tiny memories, every encounter, every moment of waiting. I replayed them in my mind like scenes on a stage. That's why my childhood is etched so vividly in my memory. Everything I lived through then I feel so clearly, so intensely, as if it stirred my blood just yesterday. Only you filled my life in those days. I bought all your books. When your name appeared in the newspaper, it was a celebration. Would you believe it? I know those articles by heart. If someone woke me in the middle of the night and read a line, I could finish it without hesitation. Every word of yours was like a prayer to me. The whole world existed only in relation to you. I read in the Viennese papers about concerts, premieres, with one thought: which of them might draw you? And in the evenings I imagined accompanying you. You enter the hall, take your seat. I pictured it 1,000 times, because I saw you at a concert only once. But why tell all this about the frenzied, tragically futile self-torment of a lonely girl? Why speak to someone who never suspected, never guessed a thing? And yet, was I still a child then? I had turned 17, 18. Young men began to glance at me in the street, but it only irritated me. Love, or even the game of love, with anyone but you felt like betrayal. My passion for you remained unchanged, but as my feelings awakened, it grew more fervent, more womanly, more earthly. What the girl who rang your doorbell could not yet understand had now become my only thought: to give myself to you, to surrender. People thought me shy, called me a recluse. I clenched my teeth and guarded my secret. But inside, a steely resolve was forming. All my thoughts, all my desires were focused on one thing: to return to Vienna, to return to you. And I succeeded, no matter how senseless my behavior may have seemed. My stepfather, a wealthy man, treated me like a daughter. But I insisted, with fierce determination. I wanted to earn my own living. And finally, I managed to leave for Vienna, to work in a ready-to-wear shop owned by a distant relative. Do I need to tell you where my first steps led, when I finally arrived in Vienna on a misty autumn evening? I left my suitcases at the station, jumped onto a tram. It seemed unbearably slow, every stop drove me mad, and rushed to our old building. There was light in your windows, and my heart sang in my chest. Only now did the city come alive for me, the city that had greeted me coldly and deafened me with its meaningless noise. Only now did I come alive, feeling your nearness, you, my undying dream. I didn't realize I was a stranger to you, whether far away, beyond the mountains, or now, separated only by a thin pane of glowing glass. I stood there, looking up. There was light, a familiar home, you, my entire world. For 2 years I had dreamed of this moment, and now it was granted to me. I stood beneath your windows through the long, warm, misty evening, until the light went out. Only then did I go to find my new lodging. Every evening I returned there. I worked in the shop until 6, hard, exhausting work. But I welcomed the bustle. It distracted me from the torment within. And as soon as the iron shutters slammed down, I ran to your building. To see you, to meet you, that was my only desire. Even from afar, just to catch a glimpse of your face. A week passed. And then I saw you. Completely by chance, when I least expected it. I was standing in front of the building, looking up at the windows, and at that moment you crossed the street. And suddenly I was 13 again, blood rushed to my cheeks, and despite my burning desire to meet your gaze, I lowered my head and darted past like an arrow. Later I was ashamed. I was no longer a schoolgirl. I knew what I wanted. I was seeking a meeting. I wanted you to notice me, to recognize me, to love me. But for a long time, you didn't notice me. And I, despite the snowstorm, despite the biting Viennese wind, stood on your street. Sometimes for hours. Sometimes you came out with friends. Twice I saw you with women. And then I understood, I was no longer a girl. I felt the change in my love, in the sharp pain that tore through my heart when I saw another woman beside you. It wasn't a surprise, I had known since childhood that you had women. But now it hurt physically. I looked at them with envious resentment at that obvious, intimate closeness. One evening, stubborn and proud like a child, I didn't go to your building. But the evening felt unbearably empty. The next day I was back beneath your windows. I stood and waited as I had stood my whole life before the closed door of your world. And then came the evening when you noticed me. I saw you from afar and summoned all my will not to turn away. A cart was being unloaded on the street, and you had to pass close by. You glanced at me absently, and in that instant, sensing the intensity of my gaze, a familiar expression flickered in your eyes. Oh, how terrifying it was to recognize it. That look reserved for women, tender, enveloping, undressing, commanding. It held me for a second. I did not want to look away. And then you walked past. My heart pounded wildly. I slowed my steps, turned. You had stopped and were watching me. And from the way you studied me, I understood, you did not recognize me. You didn't recognize me then, nor later. You never recognized me. How can I convey to you, my beloved, the depth of disappointment in that moment? For then I felt for the first time the fate that awaited me, to remain unknown to you all my life, until death. In those 2 years in Innsbruck, when I thought of you constantly, I imagined countless scenarios, some sorrowful, some intoxicating. Everything was lived through in my mind. In darker moments, I foresaw you rejecting me, turning away, finding me insignificant, unattractive, intrusive. I endured, in thought, every torment your coldness could inflict. But even in despair, I never allowed the most terrible thought, that you might not notice me at all. Now I understand, you taught me to understand how changeable a woman's face is to a man. It is only a mirror, reflecting passion, whim, fatigue. It vanishes from memory like a reflection in glass. A man finds it hard to recognize a woman if the years have altered the play of light and shadow on her face, if her clothing has framed her anew. Truly wise is the one who submits to fate. But I was young. And your forgetfulness seemed incomprehensible. I deluded myself with the thought that you remembered me, waited for me. How could I have lived, knowing I was nothing to you, that not even a fleeting memory of me ever stirred your heart? And that awakening to reality under your gaze, which did not recognize me, was the first cruel blow. The first glimpse of my destiny. But why tell all this about the frenzied, tragically futile self-torment of a lonely girl? Why speak to someone who never suspected, never guessed a thing? And yet, was I still a child then? I had turned 17, 18. Young men began to glance at me in the street, but it only irritated me. Love, or even the game of love, with anyone but you felt like betrayal. My passion for you remained unchanged, but as my feelings awakened, it grew more fervent, more womanly, more earthly. What the girl who rang your doorbell could not yet understand had now become my only thought, to give myself to you, to surrender. People thought me shy, called me a recluse. I clenched my teeth and guarded my secret. But inside, a steely resolve was forming. All my thoughts, all my desires were focused on one thing, to return to Vienna, to return to you. And I succeeded, no matter how senseless my behavior may have seemed. My stepfather, a wealthy man, treated me like a daughter. But I insisted, With fierce determination, I wanted to earn my own living. And finally, I managed to leave for Vienna to work in a ready-to-wear shop owned by a distant relative. Do I need to tell you where my first steps led, when I finally arrived in Vienna on a misty autumn evening? I left my suitcases at the station, jumped onto a tram. It seemed unbearably slow, every stop drove me mad, and rushed to our old building. There was light in your windows, and my heart sang in my chest. Only now did the city come alive for me, the city that had greeted me coldly and deafened me with its meaningless noise. Only now did I come alive, feeling your nearness, you, my undying dream. I didn't realize I was a stranger to you, whether far away, beyond the mountains, or now, separated only by a thin pane of glowing glass. I stood there, looking up. There was light, a familiar home, you, my entire world. For 2 years I had dreamed of this moment, and now it was granted to me. I stood beneath your windows through the long, warm, misty evening, until the light went out. Only then did I go to find my new lodging. Every evening I returned there. I worked in the shop until 6, hard, exhausting work. But I welcomed the bustle, it distracted me from the torment within. And as soon as the iron shutters slammed down, I ran to your building. To see you, to meet you, that was my only desire. Even from afar, just to catch a glimpse of your face. A week passed. And then I saw you. Completely by chance, when I least expected it. I was standing in front of the building, looking up at the windows, and at that moment you crossed the street. And suddenly I was 13 again, blood rushed to my cheeks, and despite my burning desire to meet your gaze, I lowered my head and darted past like an arrow. Later I was ashamed. I was no longer a schoolgirl. I knew what I wanted. I was seeking a meeting. I wanted you to notice me, to recognize me, to love me. But for a long time, you didn't notice me. And I, despite the snowstorm, despite the biting Viennese wind, stood on your street. Sometimes for hours. Sometimes you came out with friends. Twice I saw you with women. And then I understood, I was no longer a girl. I felt the change in my love, in the sharp pain that tore through my heart when I saw another woman beside you. It wasn't a surprise. I had known since childhood that you had women. But now it hurt physically. I looked at them with envious resentment, at that obvious, intimate closeness. One evening, stubborn and proud like a child, I didn't go to your building. But the evening felt unbearably empty. The next day I was back beneath your windows. I stood and waited, as I had stood my whole life before the closed door of your world. And then came the evening when you noticed me. I saw you from afar and summoned all my will not to turn away. A cart was being unloaded on the street, and you had to pass close by. You glanced at me absently, and in that instant, sensing the intensity of my gaze, a familiar expression flickered in your eyes. Oh, how terrifying it was to recognize it. That look reserved for women. Tender, enveloping, undressing, commanding. It held me for a second. I did not want to look away. And then you walked past. My heart pounded wildly. I slowed my steps, turned. You had stopped and were watching me. And from the way you studied me, I understood, you did not recognize me. You didn't recognize me then, nor later. You never recognized me. How can I convey to you, my beloved, the depth of disappointment in that moment? For then I felt for the first time the fate that awaited me, to remain unknown to you all my life, until death. In those 2 years in Innsbruck, when I thought of you constantly, I imagined countless scenarios, some sorrowful, some intoxicating. Everything was lived through in my mind. In darker moments, I foresaw you rejecting me, turning away, finding me insignificant, unattractive, intrusive. I endured, in thought, every torment your coldness could inflict. But even in despair, I never allowed the most terrible thought, that you might not notice me at all. Now I understand, you taught me to understand how changeable a woman's face is to a man. It is only a mirror, reflecting passion, whim, fatigue. It vanishes from memory like a reflection in glass. A man finds it hard to recognize a woman if the years have altered the play of light and shadow on her face, if her clothing has framed her anew. Truly wise is the one who submits to fate. But I was young. And your forgetfulness seemed incomprehensible. I deluded myself with the thought that you remembered me, waited for me. How could I have lived, knowing I was nothing to you, that not even a fleeting memory of me ever stirred your heart? And that awakening to reality under your gaze, which did not recognize me, was the first cruel blow. The first glimpse of my destiny. In the morning, I hurried to leave. I needed to be at the shop on time, and besides, I had decided to disappear before your servant arrived. I didn't want him to see me. When I stood before you, already dressed, you embraced me and looked at my face for a long time. Did some distant, vague memory stir in you? Or did I simply seem beautiful to you because I was glowing with happiness? Then you kissed me on the lips. I gently pulled away and turned toward the door. You asked, "Would you like to take some flowers with you?" "Yes," I said. You took 4 white roses from the blue crystal vase on your writing desk. Oh, I had known that vase since the day I first glimpsed your apartment as a child. You gave me those roses, and for many days I kissed them. We agreed to meet again. I came, and everything was wonderful once more. You gave me another, a third night. Then you said you had to leave, how I had hated your departures since childhood, and promised to let me know as soon as you returned. I gave you an address, to be held at the post office. I didn't give you my name. I guarded my secret. And again, as a farewell, you gave me roses. Every day, for 2 months, I checked. No, there's no need to describe the torment of waiting, the hours of despair. I do not blame you. I love you as you were, passionate and forgetful, impulsive and inconstant. I love you just as you remained. You had long since returned. I saw it in the lit windows of your apartment. But you didn't write. I have not a single line from you, not a word in this, my final hour. Not a single line from the one to whom I gave my entire life. I waited. Waited with the kind of patience born only of despair. But you never called for me. Never wrote. Not a word. My child died last night. He was your child too. Yes, my beloved, he was our child, the fruit of one of those 3 nights. I swear this to you, and you know, before death, one does not lie. He was our son, our only child. No man touched me from the night I gave myself to you until the night my child left my body. My body felt sacred to me because you had touched it. How could I divide myself between you, who were everything to me, and others, fleeting and meaningless? He was our child, beloved. A child born of my deep love and your carefree, generous, almost unconscious tenderness. But you may ask, with fear or simply surprise, why I kept silent all these years, why I speak of it only now, when he lies in darkness, asleep forever, when he will soon be carried away and never return. But how could I tell you? You wouldn't have believed me. You wouldn't have believed a stranger, a companion of 3 nights, a nameless figure from a fleeting encounter. You would have doubted that I remained faithful to you. You might have found my words plausible, but the secret thought that I was trying to burden you with another man's child would have lingered. A shadow would have fallen between us. A vague, elusive shadow of mistrust. I didn't want that. I knew you. Knew you better than you know yourself. I understood, you, who sought in love only play, lightness, freedom, could not bear sudden responsibility. You, accustomed to complete independence, would have felt bound. And you, not out of cruelty, but by your nature, would have come to resent me for tying you down. Perhaps for an hour, perhaps for a moment, but I would have become a burden to you. And I wanted you to think of me all your life without unease. I chose to bear everything myself rather than become a weight on your shoulders. I wanted to be the one woman among all who loved you whom you remembered with gratitude. But alas, you never thought of me. You forgot me. I do not blame you, beloved. No, I do not blame you. Forgive me if a drop of bitterness seeps into these lines. My child, our child, lies dead beside me, beneath flickering candles. I shook my fist at God, called him a murderer. My thoughts are tangled. Forgive my complaint, forgive me. I know you are kind. You help everyone who turns to you. But your kindness is of a particular kind. It is vast, but passive. It waits for requests, reminders. You help out of shame, out of weakness, not out of joyful readiness. You love a person in need no more than one blessed by fortune, as you were yourself. And people like you, even the kindest, are hard to ask. Once, when I was a child, I saw through the peephole how you gave alms to a beggar. You gave generously, before he could ask. But you did it hastily, awkwardly, wishing he would leave quickly. You avoided his gaze. I remembered that forever. That's why I never turned to you. Of course, you would have helped me even without being sure the child was yours. You would have given money, offered comfort. But with a secret wish to be done with it quickly. I even believe you would have tried to persuade me to prevent the child's birth. And that was what I feared most. Because I would have done anything you asked. How could I refuse you? But this child was everything to me. He was from you. A repetition of you. But not you, not the happy, free man I could never hold. He was you, given to me forever. You, enclosed in my body, inseparable from my life. Now, at last, I had you. I could feel your life growing within me. I could feed, nourish, caress, kiss you when my soul longed for tenderness. That is why, beloved, I was so happy knowing I carried your child. That is why I kept it from you. Now you could no longer slip away from me. My beloved, I have lived not only through months of dreaming, filled with hope and quiet happiness. I have also endured months of horror, humiliation, and pain, months steeped in revulsion at human baseness. It was not easy for me. In the final months, I could no longer go to the shop. My relatives would have noticed my condition and informed my family. I refused to ask my mother for money. I survived by selling the last valuable belongings I had managed to keep. A week before the birth, the laundress stole the few remaining crowns from my cupboard, and I was forced to go to a charity maternity ward. There, where the poorest, most forgotten, most forsaken children are born, there, in the depths of poverty, your child came into the world. The ward was terrifying. Everything felt foreign, and we women lying side by side were strangers to one another, even hostile. Only shared misfortune, shared agony had driven us into that stifling room, reeking of chloroform and blood, filled with cries, moans, and coarse laughter. I endured every humiliation that can befall a destitute woman. Shame, moral and physical. I suffered from the forced closeness with the sick, with women broken by life. I suffered from the cynicism of young doctors who, smirking, pulled back blankets and touched defenseless bodies with feigned professionalism. From the greed of attendants, from the glances and words that lash and crucify human modesty. A name tag, that's all that remains of you. And what lies on the cot is merely a trembling body, an object on display. Women who give birth at home, in love and care, do not know what it means to give birth alone, defenseless, almost like on a laboratory table. Even now, when I come across the word hell in a book, I involuntarily recall that overcrowded, foul-smelling ward, full of groans, shrieks, and vulgar laughter, that cesspool of shame. Forgive me for speaking of this. I do so for the first and last time. I have been silent for 11 years. Soon I will be silent forever. But just once, I must give myself permission, must cry out about the price I paid for the child who was the joy of my life and now lies lifeless. I had long forgotten all of it in his smile, in his laughter, in my happiness. But now, with his death, the pain returns. I cannot stay silent. I must unburden my soul just once. But I do not blame you. I blame only God, who made my suffering meaningless. I swear to you, I never rose against you. Even in the hour when my body writhed in labor, even when the pain tore through my soul, I did not blame you. I never regretted those nights. Never cursed my love for you. I always loved you. Always blessed our meeting. And if I had to go through it all again, I would. Once more. 1,000 times. Our child died yesterday. You never knew him. Never, not even by chance, did your gaze fall upon that small, blooming creature born of you. I hid from you for a long time. When I had the child, I think I even loved you more calmly. At least, that love no longer brought unbearable suffering. I didn't want to divide myself between you and my son. I gave myself not to you, the favored one of fate, whose life passed me by, but to the child who needed me, whom I could feed, kiss, hold to my breast. It was as if I had been freed from the power of fate, which had condemned me to passion for you, ever since another you appeared, one who truly belonged to me. Only rarely, very rarely, did I approach your home. But every year, on your birthday, I sent you white roses, the same kind you gave me after our first night. Did you ever ask yourself who sent them? Did you remember the one to whom you once gave such roses? I don't know. And I will never know. Just once a year, to reach out to you from the shadows with those flowers, to revive the memory of that meeting. I asked for nothing more. You never knew our poor child. Today I regret having hidden him from you. Because you would have loved him. You never saw how he smiled, how he opened his dark, thoughtful eyes, your eyes, lighting them with radiant joy. He was cheerful, sweet. In him, your liveliness, your passionate imagination returned. He could play for hours, as you play with life, and then, with furrowed brow, sit absorbed over his books. He became more and more like you. In him emerged your duality, a blend of seriousness and lightness. And the more he resembled you, the more deeply I loved him. He was a good student, chattered in French like a magpie. His notebooks were the neatest in class. He was beautiful in a black velvet suit, in a white sailor's blouse. He always stood out wherever he went. When I walked with him on the beach in Grado, women would stop to stroke his fair hair. When he sledded in Searing, people turned to look at him with admiration. He was lovely, gentle, affectionate. Last year he entered the Theresianum, wore a uniform and a little sword like a page from the 18th century. And now he wears only a little shirt. He lies there, poor thing, with blue lips. His hands folded on his chest.
Ты, может быть, спросишь, как я могла воспитывать ребенка в такой роскоши, как сумела подарить ему радости легкой, беззаботной жизни, доступной лишь избранным. Любимый мой, я говорю с тобой из мрака, и я не стыжусь. Я скажу тебе, только не пугайся, прошу, я продавала себя. Я не стала тем, кого называют уличной феей, я не была проституткой в привычном смысле, но я продавала себя. У меня были богатые друзья, любовники. Сначала я искала их, потом они искали меня. Потому что я была, замечал ли ты это когда-нибудь? Очень хороша собой. Все, кому я отдавалась, были благодарны мне, привязывались ко мне, многие любили меня. Только ты не полюбил. Только ты, мой любимый. Презираешь ли ты меня теперь, после этого признания? Нет. Я знаю, ты не презираешь. Ты все поймешь. Поймешь, что я поступала так ради тебя, ради твоего второго «я», ради твоего ребенка. Однажды, в палате родильного приюта, я прикоснулась к ужасу нищеты. Я поняла, бедного всегда топчут, унижают, он — жертва. Я ни за что не хотела, чтобы твое дитя, твое светлое, чудное дитя выросло на дне, среди голытьбы, среди пошлости улицы, в зачумленном воздухе задворков. Я не хотела, чтобы его губы произносили грубые слова, чтобы его белое тело касалось жесткое, заскорузлое белье бедноты. У твоего ребенка должно было быть все, что дает этот мир. Он должен был подняться до тебя, до твоей жизненной сферы. Вот почему, только поэтому, любимый, я продавала себя. Для меня в этом не было жертвы. То, что называют честью или позором, не имело для меня значения. Ты не любил меня, ты единственный, кому по праву принадлежало мое тело. Все остальное было мне безразлично. Ласки мужчин, даже их искренние чувства, не вызывали отклика. Хотя некоторых я уважала, памятуя о своей собственной неразделенной любви, от души жалела. Все, кого я знала, были добры ко мне, баловали, уважали. Один граф, пожилой вдовец, любил меня, как родную дочь. Он обивал пороги, чтобы выхлопотать прием в Терезианум для твоего ребенка. 3-4 раза он просил моей руки. Я могла бы стать графиней, владелицей замка в Тироле, могла бы забыть обо всем. У ребенка был бы любящий отец, у меня добрый, спокойный муж. Но я отказалась. Я знала, что причиняю ему боль. Быть может, я поступила опрометчиво. Быть может, мы жили бы сейчас в тиши, и мое ненаглядное дитя было бы живо. Но почему не признаться? Я не хотела себя связывать. Я хотела быть свободной для тебя. Где-то в глубине души все еще жила детская мечта, что ты позовешь меня. Хотя бы на 1 час. И ради этого одного возможного часа я оттолкнула все. Лишь бы быть свободной. Лишь бы явиться по первому твоему зову. Чем была вся моя жизнь с того момента, как я вышла из детства, как не ожиданием твоей прихоти? И этот час действительно настал. Но ты не узнал его. Не подозревал. Ты не узнал меня, никогда ты не узнавал меня. Я ведь и раньше часто встречала тебя, в театре, на концертах, в пратере, на улице. Каждый раз сердце замирало. Но ты не смотрел на меня. Я изменилась. Из робкой девочки превратилась в женщину. Говорили, что я красива. Я была богато одета, окружена поклонниками. Как мог ты узнать в этой женщине ту, что стояла в полумраке твоей спальни? Иногда кто-то из мужчин, сопровождавших меня, раскланивался с тобой. Ты отвечал на поклон, бросал взгляд, холодный, вежливый, чужой. Помню, однажды это неузнавание причинило мне жгучую боль. Это было в театре. Я сидела в ложе с другом, ты — в соседней. Началась увертюра, свет погас, и я больше не видела твоего лица. Но я слышала твое дыхание, как тогда, в ту ночь. На бархатном барьере покоилась твоя рука, тонкая, нежная, любимая. И мной овладело неодолимое желание наклониться и поцеловать эту чужую, столь родную руку. Я едва удержалась. После первого акта я попросила друга увести меня. Я не могла больше сидеть рядом с тобой, так близко, так бесконечно далеко. Но час настал еще раз. Последний раз в моей разрушенной жизни. Это было почти год назад. На следующий день после твоего дня рождения. Странно, я весь день думала о тебе. День твоего рождения я всегда справляла как праздник. Рано утром я вышла, купила белые розы и, как всегда, послала их тебе, в память о забытом тобой часе. Днем я поехала с мальчиком кататься, потом в кондитерскую Демеля, а вечером в театр. Я хотела, чтобы он, не зная ничего, запомнил этот день как таинственный праздник. На завтра вечером я была на концерте с моим другом, молодым фабрикантом из Брюнна. Мы были вместе уже 2 года. Он обожал меня, заботился, хотел жениться. Я отказывала, как и другим. Он был достойным человеком, его преданность заслуживала большего. Но я не могла. Я не могла связать себя. Я все еще ждала тебя. После концерта мы поехали ужинать на Рингштрассе. Среди смеха и шуток я предложила заглянуть в танцевальный зал, в Табарин. Обычно я отказывалась от таких мест, шум, пьяное веселье были мне противны. Но в тот вечер что-то необъяснимое, магическое, тянуло меня туда. Словно что-то должно было случиться. Мы пошли. Пили шампанское. На меня нашла неистовая, почти мучительная веселость. Я пела, смеялась, почти готова была танцевать. И вдруг, словно ледяной холод или огненный жар, обдало мое сердце. Я увидела тебя. Ты сидел за соседним столиком с приятелями. И смотрел на меня, восхищенно, с желанием. Тем самым взглядом, который всегда проникал в самую глубину моего существа. Впервые за 10 лет ты смотрел на меня с той самой силой, с той безотчетной страстностью. Я задрожала. Чуть не выронила бокал. К счастью, никто не заметил моего смятения, оно затерялось в раскатах смеха и музыки. Твой взгляд становился все упорнее, все пламеннее, он жег меня, как огнем. Я пыталась понять, узнал ли ты меня наконец? Или я снова была для тебя новой, незнакомой женщиной? Кровь прилила к щекам, я рассеянно отвечала на вопросы друзей. Ты не мог не заметить, как сильно взволновал меня. Едва заметным кивком ты дал понять, чтобы я вышла в вестибюль. Затем нарочито громко потребовал счет, простился с приятелями и ушел, ясно давая понять, что будешь ждать. Я дрожала, как в ознобе, меня била лихорадка, я не могла вымолвить ни слова, не могла справиться с охватившим волнением. В этот момент негритянская пара, дробно стуча каблуками и пронзительно вскрикивая, начала исполнять модный, замысловатый танец. Все взгляды обратились к ним, и, воспользовавшись этим, я поднялась, сказала другу, что скоро вернусь, и вышла за тобой. Ты стоял у вешалок, ждал. Когда я подошла, твое лицо просияло. Ты улыбнулся, поспешил навстречу, и я сразу поняла, ты не узнал меня. Ни подростка, ни девушку из прошлого. Тебя снова влекло ко мне, как к чему-то новому, неизведанному. «Найдется у вас часок и для меня?» — спросил ты с той непринужденной уверенностью, с какой мужчины обращаются к женщинам, которых можно купить на вечер. «Да», — произнесла я тоже трепетное, но само собой разумеющееся «да», которое когда-то, более 10 лет назад, сказала тебе робкая девочка на Сумеречной улице. «Когда мы могли бы увидеться?» — спросил ты. «Когда хотите», — ответила я. «Перед тобой у меня не было стыда». Ты удивленно взглянул на меня с тем же недоверчивым любопытством, как в тот вечер, когда я поразила тебя поспешностью своего согласия. «Можно и сейчас?» — нерешительно спросил ты. «Да», — сказала я, — «идет». Я направилась к вешалке за манто и вдруг вспомнила, что номерок остался у моего друга. Вернуться и просить его значило бы объясняться. Но и пожертвовать этим часом, о котором я мечтала столько лет, я не могла. Не колеблясь, я набросила на вечернее платье шаль и вышла в сырую, туманную ночь. Я не думала о манто, не думала о добром, любящем человеке, с которым жила уже несколько лет. Я поставила его в нелепое, унизительное положение. У всех на глазах его женщина, его спутница, убегает по знаку первого встречного. А я ясно осознавала всю низость, всю неблагодарность, все бесстыдство своего поступка. Я понимала, что наношу смертельную обиду хорошему человеку, что разрываю с налаженной жизнью. Но что значила дружба, что значила сама жизнь, по сравнению с нетерпеливым желанием вновь ощутить твои губы, услышать нежность твоих слов? Так я любила тебя. Теперь могу сказать это, когда все прошло. Мне кажется, если бы ты позвал меня с моего смертного одра, у меня хватило бы сил встать и пойти за тобой. У подъезда стоял экипаж. Мы поехали к тебе. Я снова слышала твой голос, чувствовала твою близость и была так же опьянена, так же по-детски счастлива, как в ту первую ночь. Я вновь поднималась по лестнице, впервые за более чем десятилетие. Нет, я не могу передать, как в эти мгновения все ощущалось вдвойне, в прошлом и настоящем, и во всем снова был только ты. В комнате мало что изменилось. Несколько новых картин, книг, немного мебели. Все было знакомо. А на письменном столе ваза с розами. С моими розами, которые я накануне послала тебе ко дню рождения. Ты не узнал меня, даже теперь, когда я была рядом, когда ты соединял со мной уста и руки. Но мне было отрадно видеть, что ты хранишь мои цветы, что вокруг тебя витает частица моего «я», дыхание моей любви. Ты обнял меня. Я осталась у тебя на всю долгую ночь. Но и тогда ты не узнал меня. Счастливая, я принимала твои ласки и видела, твоя страсть не различает, любимая или купленная. Ты предавался желаниям с той же беспечной щедростью, с какой всегда жил. Ты был нежен, чуток, рыцарски почтителен и в то же время страстен. Я, пьянея от счастья, как 10 лет назад, вновь почувствовала твою неповторимую двойственность, ту одухотворенную страсть, что когда-то покорила меня, полуребенка. Я не встречала другого, кто так пламенно отдавался бы минуте, так щедро раскрывал бы душу, чтобы потом все исчезло в безграничной, почти противоестественной забывчивости. Но и я забыла себя. Кто была я здесь, в темноте, рядом с тобой? Влюбленная девочка? Мать твоего ребенка? Или просто женщина из ресторана? Ах, все было так знакомо, и в то же время упоительно ново. Я молилась, чтобы этой ночи не было конца. Но утро пришло. Мы встали поздно, и ты пригласил меня позавтракать. Мы пили чай, приготовленный невидимой, заботливой рукой, и болтали непринужденно. Ты говорил просто, сердечно, без нескромных вопросов, без любопытства. Ты не спросил, кто я, где живу. Я была для тебя случайной прихотью, безымянной минутой, исчезающей, как дымок в воздухе. Ты рассказал, что скоро отправляешься в большое путешествие, в Северную Африку, на 2-3 месяца. Я задрожала. Радость сменилась отчаянием. В ушах уже звучало «конец». Все прошло. Все забыто, точка. Мне хотелось броситься к твоим ногам, закричать «возьми меня с собой». Тогда ты узнаешь меня, наконец, после стольких лет. Но я была робка, малодушна, рабски покорна тебе. Я только сказала. Как жаль. Ты улыбнулся и взглянул на меня. Тебе правда жаль? Я не выдержала. Поддалась внезапному порыву. Встала и долго, пристально смотрела тебе в лицо. Потом сказала. Тот, кого я любила, тоже всегда уезжал. Я смотрела тебе прямо в глаза. Сейчас он узнает меня. Трепетала душа от страха и надежды. Но ты лишь ласково улыбнулся. Из путешествий ведь возвращаются. Да, ответила я, возвращаются, но уже забыв. В моем голосе, должно быть, прозвучало нечто слишком страстное, потому что ты вдруг встал и посмотрел на меня с удивлением и теплой нежностью. Ты взял меня за плечи. Хорошее не забывается. Тебя я не забуду, сказал ты и погрузил взгляд в самую глубину моих глаз, словно хотел запечатлеть мой образ. И я почувствовала, как этот взгляд проникает в меня, впитывает все мое существо. Он узнает меня, узнает. Ликовала душа. Но ты не узнал. Нет, ты не узнал меня. И никогда я не была тебе столь чужой, ибо, иначе как мог бы ты сделать то, что сделал через несколько минут? Ты поцеловал меня. Страстно, жадно. Я поправила растрепанные волосы и, взглянув в зеркало, увидела, чуть не упала от ужаса, как ты украдкой сунул в мою муфту 2 крупные купюры. Как я удержалась, чтобы не вскрикнуть, не ударить тебя? Ты заплатил мне, любившей тебя с детства, матери твоего ребенка. Я была для тебя просто женщиной из Табарина. Ты заплатил. Мало того, что ты меня забыл, ты еще и унизил. Я начала торопливо собирать свои вещи. Только бы уйти. Мне было слишком больно. Шляпа лежала на письменном столе рядом с вазой белых роз. Моих роз. И тут мной овладело неудержимое желание сделать еще одну попытку. Не дашь ли ты мне одну из твоих белых роз? С удовольствием, ответил ты и вынул цветок. Но, может быть, тебе их подарила женщина, которая тебя любит? Может быть, сказал ты, не знаю. Их прислали, и я не знаю от кого. За это я их люблю. Я взглянула на тебя. Может быть, они от женщины, которую ты забыл? Ты изумленно посмотрел на меня. Я смотрела твердо, прямо в глаза. «Узнай меня, узнай же!» Кричал мой взгляд. Но твои глаза светились лаской и неведением. Ты еще раз поцеловал меня. Но ты не узнал. Я поспешно направилась к дверям. Слезы готовы были хлынуть, а ты не должен был их видеть. Я так спешила, что в прихожей чуть не столкнулась с твоим слугой. Он проворно отступил, распахнул дверь. И в этот миг, ты слышишь? В этот краткий миг, когда я сквозь слезы взглянула на старика, в его глазах вспыхнул свет. Он узнал меня. Иоганн он узнал, хотя не видел меня с детства. Мне хотелось пасть перед ним на колени, целовать руки за то, что он узнал. Но я лишь выхватила из муфты эти ужасные деньги и сунула их ему. Он задрожал, испуганно посмотрел на меня. В эту секунду он, быть может, понял обо мне больше, чем ты за всю свою жизнь. Все любили меня. Все были добры. Только ты один не помнил. Ты один ни разу не узнал. Мой ребенок умер. Наш ребенок. Теперь мне некого любить, кроме тебя. Но кто ты для меня? Ты, проходящий мимо, как мимо прозрачной воды. Наступающий, как на камень. Ты, неизменно обрекающий меня на разлуку и вечное ожидание. Однажды мне казалось, что я удержала тебя в ребенке. Но это был твой ребенок. Он покинул меня. Забыл. Не вернется. Я опять одна. Совсем одна. У меня ничего нет от тебя. Ни ребенка, ни слова, ни строчки, ни знака памяти. Если бы ты услышал мое имя, оно ничего бы тебе не сказала. Почему мне не желать смерти, если я мертва для тебя? Почему не уйти, если ты ушел? Нет, любимый, я не упрекаю. Я не хочу вселить свое горе в твой светлый дом. Не бойся, я не стану больше докучать. Прости. Я должна была излить душу в час смерти моего ребенка. Только раз я должна была все сказать. Потом я снова исчезну во мраке. И буду молчать, как всегда молчала. Ты не услышишь моего стона, пока я жива. Только когда я умру, получишь ты это завещание. Завещание женщины, любившей тебя больше всех. Женщины, которую ты никогда не узнавал. Всю жизнь она ждала и не дождалась. Быть может, ты позовешь меня тогда. Но я впервые нарушу верность тебе, я не услышу из могилы. Я не оставлю тебе ни портрета, ни знака памяти. Как и ты мне, ничего. Никогда ты не узнаешь меня. Никогда. Такова была моя судьба в жизни, пусть будет так и в смерти. Я не позову тебя в мой последний час. Я ухожу, и ты не знаешь ни моего имени, ни моего лица. Я умираю легко, потому что ты не чувствуешь этого. Если бы тебе было больно, я не смогла бы умереть. Я больше не могу писать, такая тяжесть в голове, все тело ломит, жар, кажется, мне придется лечь. Может быть, скоро все кончится. Может быть, судьба сжалится, и я не увижу, как унесут мое дитя. Я больше не могу писать. Прощай, любимый. Прощай. Благодарю тебя. Все, что было, было хорошо. Вопреки всему. Я буду благодарна тебе до последнего вздоха. Мне хорошо, я сказала тебе все. Ты теперь знаешь, нет, ты только догадываешься, как сильно я тебя любила. И в то же время моя любовь не станет бременем для тебя. Тебе не будет недоставать меня, это меня утешает. Ничто не изменится в твоей прекрасной, светлой жизни. Я не омрачу ее своей смертью. Это утешает меня, любимый. Но кто теперь будет присылать тебе белые розы ко дню твоего рождения? Ах, ваза опустеет. Легкое дыхание моей жизни, раз в год овевавшее тебя, исчезнет, развеется, как утренний туман. Любимый, прошу тебя, это моя первая и последняя просьба, исполни ее ради меня. Каждый год, в день твоего рождения, ведь это день, когда человек невольно вспоминает о себе, купи белые розы и поставь их в синюю вазу. Делай это, любимый, как другие заказывают панихиду по ушедшей душе. Но я больше не верю в Бога. Я не хочу панихид. Я верю только в тебя. Люблю только тебя. И жить хочу только в тебе. Ах, пусть это будет один и единственный раз в году. Незаметно, не слышно, как я жила рядом с тобой. Прошу тебя, исполни это, любимый, это моя первая просьба и последняя. Благодарю тебя, люблю, прощай. Он отложил письмо дрожащей рукой. Долго сидел, не двигаясь, погруженный в молчаливую задумчивость. В нем поднимались смутные образы: соседская девочка, робкая девушка, женщина из ночного ресторана, но все было неясно, расплывчато, как очертания камня, мерцающего под водой. Тени набегали и исчезали. Образ не складывался. Память жила, но о чем? Он не мог вспомнить. Казалось, он видел все это во сне, в каком-то глубоком, далеком сне, но только во сне. И вдруг его взгляд упал на синюю вазу, стоявшую на письменном столе. Она была пуста. Впервые за много лет, пуста в день его рождения. Он вздрогнул. Показалось, будто распахнулась невидимая дверь, и в комнату ворвался холодный ветер, ветер из другого мира. Он ощутил дыхание смерти и дыхание бессмертной любви. Что-то раскрылось в его душе. Он подумал об ушедшей жизни, как о бесплотном видении, как о далекой, страстной музыке. Письмо незнакомки прочитано до конца. Но ее голос, наполненный любовью и болью, навсегда останется с нами. Эта история — напоминание о том, как много мы порой не замечаем в других и как важно ценить каждое мгновение, чтобы потом не сожалеть о потерянном. Спасибо, что разделили с нами эти размышления.